Welcome to an SFB Addict video. SFB Addict here. This is the fourth promised video, the how-to play. Now I realize that I've already done other how-to play videos, and you can find them under my playlists under the SFB Cadet section. And there's a section here for Learn to Play, Scenario 1, 2, and 3. This is before the Vassal module was created. It's pretty generic. This will show you how to play. And then I also remade the how to play when the Vassal module was created, and that is here. The Starfleet Battles Cadet Scenario 1 and 2 learn to play on Vassal, and Scenario number 3 learn to play on Vassal, and Scenario 4. So you can watch any of those to learn how to play, and it takes it a little bit slower. So what I'm going to do with this learn to play is it's going to be quick and dirty. It's not going to step you through anything gently, it's just simply going to throw you in the deep end. So, Starfleet Battles is a very simple game where you move counters around on the map, maneuver, and shoot. And you have a little sheet that represents your ship upon which you mark damage. You shoot your way through the shields, so when the shield is completely gone, you then start damaging systems internal to the ship. It's a pretty simple concept. Now the game is played on an impulse chart. The cadet module, the first 2-3 scenarios, uses an 8 impulse movement chart. In other words, the fastest an object is going to be moving is speed 8, and there are 8 impulses to a turn. And so on impulse 1, you then go through the sequence of play, and the sequence of play is these basic steps. You would, on a single turn, energy allocate. You would then reveal your speed. You would then go through the impulse procedure as many times as the chart has. The full game uses 32 impulses. The cadet game uses 16 impulses, and there is an 8 impulse chart for the first 3 scenarios of the cadet game. So this would be 8, 16, and 32 times depending on which one you're playing. And the impulse procedure is this right here. You move your ships, you move your weapons. If the seeking weapons hit, you resolve the damage. You can launch seeking weapons, you can fire direct fire weapons, resolve the weapons damage, end of impulse. Repeat again for impulse 2. Go through these steps. Go to impulse 3. Repeat these steps. Go to impulse 4. So depending on what speed you're going, let's say you're going speed 5, that means in a single turn your ship is going to move 5 hexes. So you're going to go from here to there by the end of the turn because you're going speed 5. Another player may be going speed 3, in which case through the turn they will move 3 hexes. So instead of playing a game where you simply move your 5 and he moves his 3, it's spaced out and it's done simultaneously over time, and that's what the turn is. So speed 5 and speed 3, well, impulse 1 neither moves, impulse 2 5 does, 3 doesn't, impulse 3 5 doesn't, speed 3 does, impulse 4 speed 5 moves, speed 3 doesn't, impulse 5 speed 5 does, speed 3 doesn't, impulse 6 speed 5 doesn't, speed 3 does, impulse 7 speed 5 does, 3 doesn't, impulse 8, they both move. And that's the entire turn. And in that turn, speed 3 is moved 3 times, speed 5 is moved 5 times. That's the game. That's how it's played. Now, The 8 impulse chart is only used introductorily for the first 3 scenarios, and in those 3 scenarios everything is moving speed 8, so everything moves every single impulse. Now the 16 impulse chart and the 32 impulse chart, when you eventually start playing the full game, these are what you're going to use. So you would mark what speed you're going, and then as you execute the impulses, if the speed is called, that ship going that speed moves. So here, the ship going speed 12 would move on impulse 2, where the ship going speed 5 doesn't. And you go through the turn. Now this is a graphical version of the impulse movement chart. You don't need to use this because I've provided 2 ways of doing it. The chart that I just showed you and just removed, and in addition to that you can use these impulse procedure boxes. So this one was designed for the first 3 scenarios when you're moving speed 8. It's the same as this impulse procedure chart. This chart has more steps. So you got move ships, you got move ships. You have move seeking weapons, resolve seeking weapons, resolve seeking weapons. This one adds cloaking device, tractor beams, and launching seeking weapons, where this one just goes to seeking weapons. That's because these are used in scenarios 7 through 12, where this one is used in the earlier scenarios. So as you learn the rules, you add the steps. So this one's pretty basic. This one is more involved. Now once you've really learned all these steps, you can kind of combine them, because moving of ships and moving seeking weapons kind of all happens at the same time. So that's where this chart here comes in. It's the same chart. You've got move ships, but here you have terrain-induced movement, things like black holes, or if your ships are in a nebula, the nebula may push your ship. Move ships, move shuttles and fighters, move seeking weapons, and then resolve damage. Well, that's the same thing as this. Move ships, move seeking weapons, resolve seeking weapons, damage. It's all the same thing. So these 3 steps are all combined in this one step. But it's the same things that happen. Then you got uncloak, cloak, tractor, tractor, launch, launch. But now you've got ESGs added. If you're using Lyrans, this is where those actions would occur. On this impulse chart, you haven't learned ESGs yet. This one is the full one, so it has that step. And then you have shield operations. Seltorian shield cracker. In this one you don't have the Seltorian shield cracker because you haven't learned those rules yet or been introduced to that race. Here you have, so it has that step. So the impulse chart, speed 16, and one of these 2 charts together is your sequence of play impulse procedure. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to use the SOP and the impulse calls, which are located here. So the sequence of play and your speed calls. That's the same thing as pulling up your charts and doing the speed calls on the 16 impulse chart and your sequence of play chart. So those 2 things here are the same as the 2 graphical ones, except these are small, compact, and they're not graphical. But these ones here have the ability of editing or configuring it so that if you're not using Lyrans, you can remove the ESG step so it's not called out. You can remove the Seltorian shield cracker step if you're not using Seltorians so that that step is not called. So this is editable, whereas the graphical one isn't. So when you're going through these steps, you can't skip the Seltorian shield cracker step. So this one here is more flexible. Now both sets echo that information into the chat area. So when I was clicking on the graphical chart, it was echoing that information to the chat area. Well, the same thing happens with this. So here it says advance the 8, 16, or 32 speed call button for movement and then return to the stop button. So it's telling you to go down here and click this button. So the first step here is bookkeeping. That's where you take your SSD, you count up your power, and then you fill out your energy allocation sheet. So this Federation ship generates 16 warp, 2 impulse, and 2 atomic power for a total of 20 power. It has 2 batteries. So here are your 2 batteries. There is your left warp, there is your right warp, here is your impulse, and here's your APR. So those are your power systems. So you would allocate that information on your spreadsheet. You allocate your power for movement, what you're doing for shield reinforcement, what you're doing for specialty shuttles, if any, Wild Weasel suicide shuttles, put power into tractor beam, electronic warfare, fixing damaged systems, until you've used up all your power. And then you've got some bookkeeping information here on the energy allocation form, like whether or not your phaser capacitors are fully energized, during the turn if you fire them, and during the turn if you use your batteries. It's where you keep track of information. So that's basically the game. Your sequence of play, your impulse calls, your counter on your ship, and then you just play within the rules. So here, bookkeeping, that's been done. And we call out turn 1, impulse 1, speed 16's move. So if my ship was going speed 14, it doesn't move this impulse. Then I call out impulse 2. All of these speeds move. If my ship was going speed 14, here it does move. But you just simply don't move your ships. You have all those firing opportunities. So let's go back to turn 1, impulse 1. So on turn 1, impulse 1, we've called the speed. Now we got to go through the sequence of play. So that's what this button's for. Movement has already occurred when this has been called out, so we moved our ships if it was supposed to move. Now it's the cloak-decloak stage. So if we had a Romulan, this is where they could either cloak or decloak. Next stage, tractor beam stage. We wanted to tractor something. This is where we would conduct that action. Next step, launch stage. This is where we can conduct that action. Step after that, shield operations. Transporters. Emergency deceleration if we wanted to declare that our ship is going to come to a stop in a couple of impulses. Dogfighting if shuttles or fighters get in the same hex and they want to fight. This is where shuttles can land on the ship, or if the ship wants to launch them, or if it wants to drop a mine. This is where you fire weapons. And then if you're a Tholian, they fired web. This is the step where the web would solidify. And now we're told to advance the sequence of play again. So now we go from impulse 1 to impulse 2, and then we go through these steps all over again. And then we go to the next impulse. And we go through these all over again. So that's the 2 ways of doing that. So you've got these 2 buttons here, which are this and this, or you can pull up this and your graphical chart, and those 2 do the same thing. So those are your 2 ways of doing it. But there's a 3rd way of doing it. Once you've learned the game, these steps are pretty well memorized. So it's only the speed chart you really need. So you could turn off your sequence of play, you could remove this chart, and you could simply just either use the speed calls or the graphical speed calls. The benefit of having them graphically here is that you can see in advance when a ship is going to move. That information is available. It's there on the chart. But let's say we didn't want to use the graphical one, we just want to use this. Well, you could just simply use this and then use the SOP steps. This is the sequence in which it all happens. Now, this is going to give you sound. So you could just simply type in the chat that you're ready to move on to the next impulse, or if you got a microphone, you could say you're ready to go to the next impulse, or you can just click the button that says ready. And there's sound. If you want to stop and think, If you've got no action and you're just waiting for your opponent to click the ready button,
No actions.
or if you have a specific action that you do wish to call out, you can call the step that you want to do an action on.
Shield status change.
And then perform your operation and type it into the chat area if you wanted to. Lowering number 1 shield. Well, why are you lowering your number 1 shield? Well, that's because after the shield steps, you've got the transporter step. So your next action is
Transporters engage.
so you can do it that way as well. So you can simply click the buttons in the SOP steps, type in what you're doing, etc. So you've got multiple ways of doing this. You can do it completely by voice if you've got sound and a microphone and headsets and you're both logged into something like Google Plus Hangouts or whatever, or Skype, etc. Or you could just simply click the buttons for the sound, or you could use the impulse and SOP calls, or you could use the charts for the impulse and for the sequence of play. Lots of options. But basically, you and your opponent move your pieces on the map. You get to the firing ranges that you want to fire, and then you call up your weapons chart. Whoops. And let's say the Federation was firing 2 of its phaser 1s at the Klingon ship at a range of 4. Well, you look at the range is 4, you roll 2 dice for the 2 phasers you're firing. You roll a 2 and a 3, so at range 4, a 2 is 5 damage, and a 3 is 4 damage, for a total of 9 damage, and then you would pull up the Klingon SSD, which you've already got on the map because you're already playing with it, kind of thing. And then you determine which shield it was that got hit. That's the number 4. And then you got 1 internal. Because you got an 8 shield, you did 9 damage. Well, then you pull out your chart for the damage allocation for the cadet ships, which is this. You roll the die. So I rolled a 1, which means it's a hull hit. So then you look at your chart and you damage a hull box. If all your hull was destroyed previously and you rolled a 1, well, instead of being a hull hit, it would be an engine hit. If all your engines were destroyed, it would then be a choice of APR, battery, lab, shuttle, or transporter. If all of those were destroyed previously, it would be weapon hit. If the weapons were all destroyed, it would then be an excess damage hit. If all the excess damage boxes were hit, then you would hit a bridge, a security, EMER, or an aux if you have any of them. And if all of those were previously hit, then your ship explodes. Game over. Pretty simple. So if you did 5 internal damage, you would roll 5 dice and do whatever those 5 systems were. So if you had 4 hull and you hit 4 ones in a row, the hull's now gone. Your 5th hit is an APR hit if you rolled a 2. Or you could have rolled 5 6s and you would have hit your 2 APR, your 2 battery, your lab, and your shuttle, etc. So depending on what you roll, that's what you would damage inside the ship. So after that, it's simply knowing your firing arcs. So these are phaser 2s, they have an FX firing arc. And FX is L, LF, RF, and R. So that basically means out this all the way around and out that row is FX. Here, the Federation phaser 1 here in the center, number 1, is FA. Well, FA is LF and RF, so that's left front and right front. So that means on the Federation, that FA would fire at this hex row, and at that hex row, and in between. So that's FA. So that's what all your different firing arcs are. Right side, FA, left side, rear half. Over here you've got FX, FA, left, right, and left, right, rear, and right, and FA. So different weapons on different ships have different firing arcs. And that's pretty much the game. There's a few more rules, which you can quickly learn by reading through them, but the essence of the game is what I've just shown you. You allocate your energy, you set a speed, you go that speed, you maneuver on the map as you're called to move, and then you do actions like fire weapons, raise, lower your shields, use transporters. If your ship has missiles, you launch a missile, or what they're called in Starfleet battles is a drone. So that's the quick and dirty on how to play Starfleet battles. So, have fun playing.